Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber, and we have a very special guest today.
Matt Freeman.
Matt is the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, the We've Got Ward podcast, where they expertly dissect the, I can't remember the whole intro, the Wild Bo's world of parahumans and superheroes and random stuff. That was my poor version of their introduction of their show. Everyone should check it out.
And he's also the co-host of one of my new favorite podcasts as well, the Doofcast, where they do the same thing with media of various kinds. Right. They've recently done it with Fifth Element and Bound, which are movies I love, and just did it with Your Name. I listened to that one today, and now I have to go see that.
Yeah, I recommend that one, and you guys are going to make me blush. Thanks for the introduction.
Well, thanks for coming. This is great.
And I love your podcast, too, by the way. I should say that.
Thanks.
Listen to every episode.
We try.
Yeah.
Speaking of trying things, and speaking of your guys' podcast, I could tell from a few episodes ago that you guys shared notes before the episode. And here we are, 3 years into our show, and I'm like, Eneasz, we should start doing that before episodes. We should have like a rough schedule of things to talk about.
What?
And so
Not just fly by the seat of our pants and try to make up for it in post?
We've brought like personal notes a couple of times, but I feel like working on this will be fun going forward. And of course, we do it on an episode where we don't really have an actual itinerary or something specific to discuss.
Right.
So now I've got hodgepodge notes for a hodgepodge episode, so buckle in.
Katrina used to be our big notes person.
Yeah.
She would always show up with like an outline and everything. And we were like, that's awesome. And then she left and we're like, well, I'm not taking that job over.
I was going to say, well, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, it can be a bit of a monster. I think our first script was 2 pages, and now our average script is like 17 pages. So
holy shit.
Don't let it get out of hand.
I don't think that'll be a problem with me. I'm.
How long after the arc comes out is it before you put out the podcast?
Well, now we're keeping up. So basically every 2 chapters. So once a week we put out a podcast covering the last 2 chapters, the last week's worth of material, whatever amount that was.
Okay.
So, but when we were doing Worm, we would do 1 arc at a time, or we would do 2 episodes per arc. But that was because that was all done. We were just making our way through it.
Yeah. Which, congrats, it's fucking huge.
That was an epic journey. Did not know what I was getting into when I started that.
Wait, I thought you'd already read it.
I mean, the podcast. I mean, yeah.
You didn't know what you were getting with the podcast.
Yeah, right.
No, those things surprise you.
Yeah.
You're like, it's an hour. Well, how long could it take, really, to put it out an hour podcast?
Mm-hmm. And in our first episode, we were like, I think, eventually we'll pick up the pace. We'll do maybe 2 or 3 arcs per episode. It went the opposite direction. So.
But, as Steven was saying, very, in-depth and insightful shit.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's things that I don't pick up on at all, because I'm trying very slowly. Like, I should have gotten this in probably primary school, but I didn't read those books because I was a bad student. But you guys dissect stuff in a way that, you notice motifs and themes that I never, would have noticed on my own.
I've watched Bound a number of times, and I did not quite, I never picked up on the focus on the hands, which, after you said it, oh yeah, totally true, nor on the fact that, everyone is in boxes, both visually and metaphorically, and it's about breaking out of those boxes. Oh my god, I have to listen to all your stuff now.
Yeah,
that level of analysis completely escapes me on things.
Well,
so that's why I find it really interesting to when I'm reading stuff on my own.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So
that's why we have these podcasts.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it's usually being forced to think through and talk about the thing that makes these things jump out. A lot of these, Scott's actually better at noticing stuff like that than me. But almost nothing jumps out at me when I'm watching a movie. It's always later when I'm okay, I know I have to talk about this, so I have to think about smart things to say, or when we're actively talking about it, things will occur to me. And
how can I trick people into thinking I'm smart?
Exactly. Yeah. That's my whole life right there. So
my way of doing that at work is, there's enough people there that sometimes I only see some people once or twice a week. So if I can say something smart in those 5-minute conversations, then I'll just leave them for a couple of days.
Yeah, and they just assume you're always doing that
exactly.
every 5 minutes.
That's the trick.
Yeah,
that's what you're like.
Leave on a high note like a comedian.
Exactly. So what are we talking about today?
I don't know what order you guys wanted to take this in. According to our notes here, I thought we brought this up at the meetup on Tuesday, which was 3-4 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Bad at days. It's been a long week.
It's been 3 days to go now.
Gotcha. That makes sense because it's Friday. Okay. So there was the, I guess, thought experiment, or I don't know if it was a thought experiment or an actual proposal by Robin Hanson.
Probably an actual proposal.
But no one's he's not proposing this to anybody, just to us. So
well, I mean, to anyone who'd listen, he put it on the web and was like, "Hey, here's a thing."
Who wants political suicide?
I think it's a genius idea.
Yeah, but we're not the main voting bloc, right? So yeah,
fucking voting blocks.
All right, so what's the idea?
I think we talked about this once before on the podcast, maybe, but it's the banned things store. where anything that is banned by the government, there's a special store in every city or every state or something, but, not too terribly out of the way, that sells all the banned things. And, it's called the banned thing store, and there's skull and crossbones, and it's like, buy these things at your own risk, you could die, and et cetera, et cetera. But anything that is banned everywhere else, you can get there legally, because then it cuts the feet out from under the black market. And, sometimes people have a legitimate reason for wanting things. Other times they just want their drugs, but sure, there's your banned things. And it's, I would go there so much for prescription drugs, honestly.
Did he draw a caveat for, like, obviously bad ideas, like WMDs or, bioweapons or big bombs?
He didn't, but I think that goes without saying. Because those things, are those even, like, banned?
Yes, I'm sure that there's a law somewhere saying I can't have a nuke.
Okay.
I would certainly hope so.
At that point, you're committing an act of war.
Which is technically banned, I'm sure, right?
Is it, though? Or do they just fight you?
Would we go to prison?
You'd probably be killed by the army.
I feel like we're digging our way too far into this. So let's assume that there's no WMDs to stave off that obvious thing. All right, so...
yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the price, too. Like, if you're going to go to the banned things... Like, another thing is you automatically think of, like, okay, well, if you have it all in one centralized place, then... You can keep track of the people who are buying the banned things. You can tax them heavily, which also helps and is better than that same, fund is going to the black market, obviously, for, well, like you mentioned. So you're simultaneously like defunding the whole criminal underworld and keeping tabs on the kinds of people who want the kinds of things that the state doesn't like, which could be viewed as a downside, actually. But yeah, if you're going to go to the store to buy a WMD, everybody knows you did that, and they're just going to follow you.
Yeah.
So,
but I think more than anything else, I like the idea because of all the, not even, well, obviously I think the drug war is awful and recreational drugs shouldn't be banned at all, but...
Eneasz just came back from Burning Man, so...
And I've held that opinion for a long fucking time, even before I ever did any drugs. But just the amount of medical interventions that are banned, I think, because, this might be harmful to people or that you have to go through a big old process to get, I'd be like, sometimes I just want to take my chances,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. So, yeah, we'll get into the fun backlash the fun backlash that Yudkowsky got and that he responded to in his Less Wrong essay. Policy debates should not be one-sided. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm in support of the idea too, at least in broad strokes. Maybe I'm not rejecting it out of hand anyway. Like, I don't like the idea of having to go get a permission slip to go get a prescription if I feel like I need it. Yeah. Like, I'm not a medical professional, but if I feel like I need a sleep aid or an alertness aid or to turn, to drugs and stuff or a painkiller, whether for pain or for fun, I can get it. It's just like, do I want to, psychedelics or something that you can't tell what they are by looking at them.
Like, and vast majority of things that are, not the vast majority, but a lot of things that are banned for the people's own good,
Right.
If you took this, it would harm you, so we must ban it. Or if you were to get this loan, it would take advantage of you, so we must ban it or whatever. And I'm a fucking adult. And I can make my own mistakes. And if I really look into something and I'm like, I can see how this is harmful for a lot of people, but I want to do that harm to myself, or I think in my situation is good, fucking let me. That's what the banned store is for. It's for the things that supposedly protect people from themselves. Whenever I hear someone say something like, do it for the children, which I also mentioned at the meetup, I right away think that is a shit law and a shit reason, and I am totally voting against this because I do not think we as a society of adults should be constrained by laws meant to protect fucking 5-year-olds. So, I'm not a 5-year-old. Don't treat me like one.
Like, a good example of that might be like residential speed limits. Like, adults are smart enough to not walk in the street, but we have residential speed limits so we don't hit kids.
Right.
So do you think that the speed limit on side streets should be 40 miles an hour like they are on like thoroughways?
No, not necessarily. I also think that most streets have their own natural safe speed limit.
Safe for who?
Well, safe for more or less everyone.
Safe to be driven on, basically, right?
Yeah. When a street is cramped and windy and small, people go slower. That's how roundabouts work. They force you to go slow because they have to make this turn. Mm-hmm. And when there is a large, straight, flat, multi-lane road with a concrete median or something in the middle separating the two opposing sides and no cross traffic, and the speed limit is set at 30 miles per hour there, it's set at 30 miles per hour so they can rake in the cash. That is a 45 mile per hour zone naturally.
Yeah. There's a town there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a trade-off between safety and freedom, which is like an ageless political question. And yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm definitely someone who would prefer things to be more on the freedom end of things. You can think of examples of stuff like alcohol where that drug should definitely be illegal, considering what other drugs are illegal.
Oh yeah.
And it used to be, and exactly like what you just outlined about organized crime made it so that they were like, fine, we'll make it legal. That's just sort of a microcosm for all of the ways in which the nanny state should probably back off, let people make their mistakes, and then just tax things, and everything would be fine.
Although, I mean, there are some things where you can hurt a lot of other people, like you were saying with WMDs, or in my opinion, people shouldn't be necessarily forced to get vaccines, but if your kids are unvaccinated, I don't want them in a school or any other public building where they come in contact with a lot of other people, because they are fucking plague rats.
Certainly if they don't have a medical reason for not being vaccinated.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you shouldn't be not allowed to attend public school because you have a genetic issue that makes a vaccine very dangerous for you.
Yes.
But since you're 1 in 10,000 or something, then that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's super trendy in California to not get vaccines, then you get that measles outbreak a few years ago at Disneyland?
Yeah. Was it
Disney World?
Disneyland?
It was,
yeah,
yeah.
it certainly should not be allowed in Disneyland.
Yeah. Interesting tangent on that. I mean, my kid's mom and I, when we were having them, especially the first one, we were kind of like, let's look into the actual science here, because it's irresponsible just to be like, well, scientists say vaccines are safe, so that's fine. Like, so we actually looked into it and we asked doctors, and they would be so dismissive and patronizing. And I'm a scientist, so it's very irritating to me when it's like, no, I'm being epistemically humble here and trying to find out the actual reasons why, and you're actually making me feel like I'm being scammed, when in actuality everyone should get vaccinated. But
did you say that to a doctor? Because I think if you'd said that sentence, they might have immediately changed disposition, because they probably get doctor, should I vaccinate my baby 5 times a day? Because they get it from people who get their medical advice from Jenny McCarthy, right? So they're sick of answering this question. Granted, they should definitely be more personable and deliver this better, right? Because you get these standoffish
yeah, I've experienced similar things with I had a kid get a whole bunch of ear infections in a row, and they had to be on antibiotics for a long time, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of concerned at how long she's been on antibiotics, and the doctor's immediately annoyed and dismissive, and it's like, I'm not actually wrong to be worried about that. It's just he has a point that it's better than the disease, but I don't know. It makes me feel like they can't actually explain themselves, which is a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I really miss my previous doctor. He quit the practice to go into policy, but God, he was good. And he would take, at least me, I'm assuming he did this with everyone, just take me very seriously, explain things, talk through things. He was such a good doctor, man.
That's why I didn't shop around for LASIK, was the guy I talked with for my consult. We talked for 90 minutes, and he couldn't have been more patient and articulate. And I asked him at the end, I was like, have you ever delivered lectures or anything on this, or taught students, in this? And he's like, oh yeah, I've taught, I don't know, a few hundred lectures and wrote 4 books. And I was like, that makes perfect sense, because what you delivered here to me was just perfect. And that, granted, I'm not coming down on doctors. I'm coming down their bedside manner for sure, and their patient interaction. But the profession, we're not anti-medicine or anything. Just caveat. But I guess never mind. We know our audience. They're not going to think we're idiots.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a point, it was that I think there's a responsibility to actually represent the science and not just badger parents into doing things, even if they're the right thing, because this is why there are anti-vaxxers. I mean, maybe that's a strong statement. I feel like there'd be less anti-vaxxers if there was less dismissiveness.
Totally. I think you're absolutely right. So this gives us an opening to segue back into the bad things store. And so Yudkowsky had this, I think it was a comment on Hanson's thread on this, that, sure, but then some, poor mom of, single mother of 5 is going to go in there and buy, Dr. Magic's snake oil of, some whatever tincture.
Sulfuric acid, right?
Yeah, sulfuric acid and die. And people took that as so you're against this, what the hell? And he's like, no, that's just what's going to happen. Right. And so I loved this was the post of policy debate should not be one-sided. That and it's part of the politics is the mind killer subsequence or sequence, because the fact that he's saying this is a flaw with this position, I still endorse it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if he came down for or against it. I don't think it really matters. But the point is that Hansen would probably readily agree to that. Yeah, some people are going to die.
Yeah. And that makes you look like a monster. People
Right.
Like if even one person dies from the sulfuric acid snake oil, we should get rid of this store.
Well, it makes you look like a monster, but it also, pointing that out makes it seem like you're against it, when it's like, no, that's just an accepted cost.
Gotcha.
And people aren't able to do that with positions they agree with.
Yeah. Whereas with the current system, with no banned thing store, we've accepted the costs that are completely invisible and unclear, like the cost of people going to find things on the black market instead, which is not viewed as a consequence of our current policy. It's viewed as people are cheating the policy, but it is a consequence of the current policy. So
Yeah. I mean, even just, you mentioned buying things like drugs. I imagine, prescription drugs would still have their imprints and everything that you could tell what they are. But if someone was hypothetically buying currently illegal psychedelics on the black market and not at the bad things store, or the banned things store, then you don't really know what you're getting. Right. You can buy at-home test kits, and they're expensive and they're somewhat reliable, but they use up some of your expensive product that you just bought. And so, for the most part, you're just taking your dealer's word for it. I'm assuming, hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this, bag of brown stuff, and you're told, "Yep, go have a good time." And it's like, "Well, what's in it?" It's what you bought, or it's what I told you it is. And it's like, okay. So you would get rid of a lot of that uncertainty with just safe access to it. I don't think that it would be possible for anyone to accidentally buy fake weed, because it's pretty identifiable, I think, even to people who are probably first-time buyers, assuming they Googled it first. Mm-hmm. But, medical first and then recreational dispensaries, we live in Colorado, they're bringing in a fortune. And, I don't know if you've ever gone to a dispensary. I bought edibles and stuff there before. It's been a long time. I used to help me sleep and it stopped, but
I assume they look a lot like smoke shops.
Yeah, but they're actually pretty they're professional, in a way that is also super hippie, and it reeks of pot in there. But they're there to talk you through the products. Like I asked, hey, what do I need for sleep? And if I something maybe that would kick in later. They're like, oh, then you don't want an edible, you want a pill. And I'm like, oh, perfect. And that's not like a great medical degree or prescription there, but that's professional helpful, right?
Yeah.
So if you could have that for all the stuff. I wonder if there's anybody who's in favor of the banned things store who's not in favor of people owning guns. Probably one, and I bet I don't know if there's
I don't think you could have that level of
contradiction.
Dissonance? Yeah, well,
lack
maybe.
of consistency. I'm
Yeah.
sure I would like to say that I don't think it would be possible to have that lack of consistency too, but
Right.
I bet
Because
people
if you
can.
ban guns, then they go in the banned gun store.
Exactly.
yeah. Well, yeah, the WMD example is instructive, because it's like, look, there's no reason for anyone to own this. Like there's even heroin, you could say, well, at least someone's going to use this for their pain or something. But there's no reason for someone to own a WMD except to kill a lot of people, which is illegal.
Yes.
So, but I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure Second Amendment, that's the right one, right? Enthusiasts would say there's lots of reasons to own guns. So
I think the Second Amendment is one of the worst reasons to own guns. Guns
are just awesome. That's why I would own one. But
yeah, I'm more pro gun than my average friend, but I'm not pro Second Amendment. There was a quote somewhere online that the founding fathers didn't even know what the fuck a germ was. Like, what am I going to take their position on literally anything today, right?
So what do you have against the Second Amendment specifically?
I have an issue specifically with saying these people 300 years ago thought of literally everything that will happen in 2018. I also like to hand wave and say, oh, I have the same issue with the fugitive slave clause in the Constitution too. Just as an example of something like, look, these guys weren't omnipotent. If that's your actual claim, that no, they were literally,
Well, shouldn't you have that same objection to all of the amendments then?
I do. Well, to basically to any, I don't think that something's worth doing because it's in the Constitution.
I
think it's important to have a guideline like that the government sticks to, but to say that's the reason, I'm not a political scientist. There's probably great reasons to say that we should just defer to that in cases of concern. But I think in any reasonable circumstance, there'll be other factors to point to as to why that's the right reason.
Well,
just like I might say because it's in the Bible is a bad reason.
I think they
because
make
if it's in
really good shelling fences, though. Bible is bullshit, but things like the actual government documents, there's some things you just don't want to be fighting about constantly, you know? It's been how many years? Like 30, 40 years now that with the abortion debate has been going on back and forth. And, you know, every now and then just settling something and drawing a line saying, look, this is settled now. Let's argue about something else for the next 40 years.
Sure.
So I'm glad that there's things like the freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution, because apparently we still have to fight about that anyway. But
freedom of
at
speech
least it's there.
Freedom of speech is a good idea, not because it's the First Amendment,
right,
but for a bunch of other independent reasons.
Exactly. But
And
it means
so-
that I don't have to fight as much about it because it is there.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, the Fugitive Slave Clause was in the Constitution too.
Right.
Right. So not everything in there was literally perfect, or
No,
not literally
no.
everything in there was perfectly perfect.
Yeah.
So I think my position is just more like to the extent that
Was the fugitive slave thing in the Constitution?
it was taken out, but it was taken out as after decades later. So I had this looked up before, but not
Okay.
in the last 5 years. What was I going to say? I don't know. Like I said, I can be on the same side of a desire or a person who desires to own a gun, but disagree with their reasons. Right? I don't think that the idea that someone who's been dead for hundreds of years said it was a good idea is a good reason. What they said was a good idea is like have a musket that you can shoot once every 45 seconds, so that the government can't take you over, because that's all we have right now too, right? So like, you know, people can get into the history. I think we're getting kind of derailed, but I think that's all I'm gonna say.
I mean, we should actually be allowed to own like Harriers, according to the Second Amendment, because we should be allowed to own weapons that can protect us from tyranny.
Apparently, right?
So now, I mean, handguns and rifles are absolutely not going to cut it anymore. So there actually should be these, weapons of mass destruction in the banned things store. I've changed my mind. 'Cause we have to be able to protect ourselves from tyranny.
Yeah,
It's in the Constitution.
they have all the bulletproof jets and helicopters and turret guns and stuff, right? We need those too if we're gonna withstand being taken over by the government.
Yeah,
So
an EMP in every house.
Ooh.
that's my platform.
I'm just trying to visualize society working when there's an EMP in everyone's house.
Oh yeah.
Just like your 5-year-old gets upset. He's like, "Fuck you, Dad."
Yeah. Yeah. Then, like, the result of the election,
Right.
the entire power grid of the country is knocked offline.
Oh, that big of an EMP.
Oh, I mean, you get enough of them spread
Okay.
around.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think 4chan would just coordinate to do one of these like every 3 hours across
Seriously?
the country,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you brought up the by you I mean Matt brought up the Rationalist Community Hub in Moscow.
Yeah, so there was a Less Wrong post in the last week or so, and it was a very detailed description of what the Rationality Hub in Moscow has been doing for the last 3 years. And I unfortunately read it too long ago to really give a good summary of what it says. It's very long and detailed too, so I don't think a summary would quite do it justice. But I found it very inspiring, and I just kind of wanted you guys to glance at it as like a basis for having a discussion about, I don't know, for a very long time, ever since discovering the rationality community, I had this idea of like what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's never really left me. So I don't know. Have you guys ever you share that image of like, wow, this could be an important, big, unique thing, and I want to be part of that,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know.
Pretty much constantly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
that's what got me into it.
Yeah.
And then when we had dinner with Robin Hanson, when he was in Denver a few months ago, he asked us a couple times, like, so what does your local community like do? And I'm just like, fucking nothing. Well, I think what I said was, it's just a place for like-minded people to get together and hang out. We don't really have like an agenda. And he's like, oh, well, some places I go and they go to meetups and they'll do, they're working on a startup or they're doing this or that. And what I wish I had said was like, no, it's a place to enforce like good, the norms that we want, but the norms that we don't get, in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. I will say that I would be sad if we swapped out what we do now for focused directed activities. I would be happy if we added focused directed activities.
Yeah, and there's been a couple small efforts to do that at our community in the last few years, but they tucker out because I think it's hard to dedicate the work.
Sure.
And like one thing I did notice skimming over the Moscow community was it is a long post, but I think they spend like $8,300 a month on like rent and salaries and workshops, and so they're clearly doing a lot. We spend $20 a month on pizza, so like it's a very different scale of what we're trying to accomplish, but it is inspiring. There's nothing stopping us from doing something super awesome.
Because like the guy who wrote the post, I believe, was like a crypto millionaire or something. So he basically funded this. I may be making that up, by the way, but he basically funded this himself. Like put in his own capital. I don't even know if he expects to get it back. I think this might have even been just like, I want to see this happen, so I'm going to do it. It's like, yeah, we can't do that. But still, it's fun to think about the possibilities, because basically he like created what they're calling like an uncafe or something. What was the word they used? Anti-cafe, yeah. Which basically is, for those who don't know, which I didn't know, is like a cafe, except instead of paying for the coffee and then sitting there and using the internet, you pay for the internet or for the time, and then they have like other amenities that are free once you've paid for the time. So I mean, it's the kind of thing that I think appeals a lot to students, actually. But
he if I recall, because I read it earlier today, he got nice stock options from the company, possibly startup, not sure, that he was working for. And so he had about $100,000, which he sunk almost entirely into this over the past several years.
So I'm just full of shit. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, well, no, it's okay.
But
I just want to put that out there. Like, this dude is awesome. He's put his life savings into this, and I want to give him his props for that.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's really cool to put that much of his net worth into it. But yeah, so the anti-cafe becomes then the hub of the community, and it's a lot more of a solid thing because it's like a permanent base.
And it's open 24/7.
That would be really cool.
They do a lot of activities. They have some games they play called Fallacy Mania. They do CFAR style workshops that are like 3 days long. Not every month, but with some regularity, and they actually do charge money for those, he said. And just a whole bunch of both directed activities and just hang out and do whatever activities in 4 different rooms. Some of them just, I think the smallest one was like a bedroom size, and the largest one could hold like 40 people in a pinch. So yeah, a whole bunch of cool stuff there.
That sounds like it'd be great if somebody else did it here. Right? Well, I mean, if I had $1 million, I think that'd be great to, rent a place, near downtown would probably suck up that $1 million pretty quick, but somewhere that's easy to get to, that people are already nearby. So that's why I was thinking downtown could start people hanging out, and they could come in and do their thing. And,
my biggest problem is the same. It's I also have to work, I have to be at work 8 hours a day, which means more like 10 hours of a day of my life is being sucked up by this. And then you don't have that much energy left. And these things really take a lot of time and energy to do. I start to understand why it's cool to have a priest class that just gets a certain tithe of the entire community's money. Yeah. He's like, this is my job now. I will take care of the community hub that has a big cross on it or whatever. And I do not want to actually do that, but I see now the logic behind it.
Well, let's plant a flag in that, because we're going to talk about the culty aspect to rationality here coming up too. So
okay,
but if we can work a tithing system into this, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can like segue between those two topics, because I actually think they're pretty related. Like the idea of the fact that
Well, before we segue, he did say that he was like running out of money, which is why he put the post up.
Okay,
and he with the things he explained that he was doing, I was like, I would love to see this sort of thing spread and be in more places. And like, I don't know how to start this sort of thing up at all.
Yeah.
Even if I had like the time and the money, I wouldn't really know what to do. And here he is out exploring, doing it, learning the lessons, and like putting down a blueprint, And I thought it would be a really damn shame for this to fold under right now. And they have the Patreon going, so I've thrown in my $10 a month for, I don't know, hopefully at least a year, to just to keep them afloat and see if that institutional knowledge can be retained, because maybe someday we could implement this early test case on a wider basis.
Yeah, because it seems like he's basically creating a company, and if it can support itself, especially if it's receiving tithes, which is basically what you just described, then it could potentially become a thing that moves to other cities. That would be really awesome.
Yeah.
Is now a good time to mention, speaking of tithing and Patreon, that we do have a Patreon for the Bayesian Conspiracy?
Oh, we do have a Patreon for the Bayesian Conspiracy. We speaking with Matt before the show, we were thinking maybe we should introduce some other things as well to entice people to join it. So maybe we'll be doing something like that in the near future.
Yeah, so keep an eye on the Patreon page, even if you're not a supporter yet.
Yeah.
Or ever. No pressure.
I wouldn't call it tithing, though.
I was trying to use that as the transition.
Because,
so.
I want a lot more money from someone if they're calling it a tithe.
Yeah, we're talking percentage points, not dollars. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because, like, I was going to, my segue, if it's okay to do that, is, like, I think what the rationality community stands for and what it could be is very important. And the fact that we're so phobic of seeming like a cult, I think has held us back from actually like accreting any kind of identity. The community at large is so wary of being accused of being a cult that we won't even, like, people don't even say that they're part of the community because they're like, oh well, yeah, I read less wrong, but I'm an aspiring rationalist.
I'm rationalist adjacent.
Yeah, I'm rationalist. It's like, shut up. Like, we're all aiming at basically the same thing. Like, why can't, and I think there's a very old Yudkowsky post that's basically like, rationalists are very bad joiners. Basically, they're the certain cluster of people in people space that hate to identify with things. And like, well, that's a damn shame, because we all kind of want the same thing, even if there's like a narcissism of small differences in terms of how we can bicker about the details of that thing. We're definitely all facing the same direction. So it's a shame that we can't coordinate a little bit better, and in terms of achieving the implicit goals in heading toward that thing.
I'm assuming we were all kind of social outcasts when we were younger, right?
That sounds right to me.
Stephen?
That checks out.
Okay, yeah, me too. And yeah. I get the feeling that is a large part of it. First of all, we don't have the social skills necessary to cohere as a group and have that sort of mentality, but also just the fear of having another society that can outcast us, or at least that is where I'm coming from it.
I would hope that's not a huge factor, although that second part makes sense. I would like to think that the social skills are learnable by rationalist adults, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
But every time I think of, like, the community that we have going, I'm like, this is awesome, and I am terrified about everything falling apart. And right now I have learned how to be comfortable alone. And as much as I would love it's like the Ada Palmer Terra Incognita series, would you sacrifice this world for one that might be better? I'm like, I don't know. I want that better world, but this one works.
Yeah.
Can you give me probabilities on might? Like,
I can't. That's the problem.
Yeah, so
if I could give you probabilities, I would have a much better decision matrix here.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely envision, if you literally take something like the Moscow example, that just, I don't, nothing about that sounds bad to me.
No.
So I can't see the downside of that. I'm not saying that, like, oh, we could just do that. Obviously, we can't. But we could do something better. Can't help but feel.
I'm not sure why we're not. I mean, yeah, definitely the aspect of not wanting to be perceived as being part of some cult, I think, is part of it. I remember having a conversation with a coworker that I really respect, who's really, really bright. I'd mentioned something about Slate Star Codex, and, oh, you heard of it? He's like, oh yeah, I've read some of his stuff. I think we disagree on a lot of things, and it's like, oh, you're aware of, like, the less wrong rationality community? He's like, yeah, I'm aware of it, and he like he had seen it, and like, oh, they're crazy. We didn't dive too much into it because I was kind of like embarrassed because I didn't want to lose face to this guy.
Yeah.
But when I noticed that, I made a point not to let that happen again. So, some of my coworkers, most of my coworkers don't know anything about my personal life, or they know very little. So I'm not avoiding the topic, but I don't also bring it up. But if it comes up organically, I'm like, oh yeah, I coordinate the local rationality community. It's like or I help coordinate the local rationality community. It's the meat space meetup of an online community from Less Wrong. This online group that's been around for a few years, and so I'm making an effort to overcome that because of that aspect. That I think there's not a good reason to be worried about it, right? This isn't some weird, creepy cult that we're going to be fired for being a part of or something, right?
I mean, the only thing about it is the possible, like you said, losing of social face. Like, oh, you're one of those internet nerds. And that's
luckily
some
I work
bullshit.
Luckily, I work at a software development company, so I mean, like, okay, yeah, I'm one of those internet nerds. Enjoy your three times a week WoW raids, right? So, like,
yeah, I had a similar experience. It was basically like, less wrong. Oh yeah, the basilisk.
God.
And I'm like, okay,
that might have come up with this guy too.
Oh,
and it's like that has nothing to do with the cultiness aspect. That's just a completely separate bad meme that's associated with less wrong, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't have anything to do with that. That's not.
That was a thing that happened in the forums. Yes.
Right. That was like 10 years ago or something at this point. So, yeah, glad that's still floating around.
Is that our biggest scandal?
I believe so.
All right. Well, that's not too bad as
far as scandals go. That ain't bad at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's so far we don't have a child pedophilia ring or anything yet, so we're not big enough to get. Yeah, we're not big enough to get tides.
We got to get our own pizza place, and then we got to build a basement.
Right. Well, and I think like to some degree we have like a social autoimmune disease because I mean, so were you guys familiar with like the Dragon Army thing that they tried to do in Berkeley, or they did do in Berkeley actually?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. Catch me up.
So yeah, maybe you can help me summarize it, but basically. A handful of people, I don't know how many actually, got together and they were like, we're going to do one of these Berkeley group houses, except they decided they were going to be almost like paramilitary about it.
I think I did know about this
basically, one. Like, this guy's in charge. You have your responsibilities. You have your obligations and expectations. And if you don't stick up to them, there's consequence. And it's like, everyone who came willingly because they wanted to be imposed upon by this kind of like social structure with the understanding that that's very motivating and it makes you a better person. And people freaked out about it. Like, they're like, this guy's a fascist nutcase. He's probably a psychopath because and it's like, okay. Like,
he was just trying something new with volunteers.
It's like a trainer at a gym who's going to like encourage you to attend, right?
Yeah.
And the other people are your gym buddies. And part of the point of having that sort of that enforcement is to keep you in it. Yeah. Right.
So, well, it's part of the same reason that your parents, when you were a kid, would say everyone eats dinner together. It is good for social bonding.
Yeah. It was pretty well thought out, and like there were some like intelligent criticisms of it, but most of it was literally just like smearing like associative, like this reminds me of things that are bad, therefore it's bad. I'm like, that's and the ratio of that kind of comment to the good kind of comment was very high, and I was like, this is really disappointing because basically tells me that like the actual capacity for experimentation and growth is got to be pretty low if we're cutting things off the table that are basically necessary things for forming an organization.
And most of these criticisms came from within the community. This wasn't
all of them.
So, I mean, it would have been more understandable if somebody from the outside heard about this house people get together and then wake up at 6:30 and work out every morning or whatever and then do this and that. And they do it because they're part of this online group called Less Wrong. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I've heard of other groups that do that, like Scientology, whatever, right?
Well, P99X.
So,
or P9, what is it?
PP90X, I think.
PP90X, okay.
I guess it would have been understandable from the outside. So what did happen from the inside? Why? Let's try and maybe not steelman isn't the right word. Try and empathize with what was going on here. Try and model the people who would attack this very fairly. What if you were ripping them apart for doing this? What would you have been saying, or why would you have said it?
I didn't say anything. I think publicly I said something along the lines. God, I don't remember if I commented at all. I would have said something along the lines of, "You're adults. Do what you want. You know." Let these people try their thing. We gotta experiment and see what works. As an emotional reaction, I was like, oh, fuck no, I'm staying the hell away from this because I very much have the disliking of authority and anyone trying to... I want that sort of social structure where my brother was in the military and he says that was such an amazing thing to have this group cohesion, you know? And I'm very sorry for him that he was in the military because that's a shitty place to get this thing. But I'm really rambling. I'm not good with that sort of feeling that I am being imposed upon by an authority figure. And whoever was in charge of this would automatically become the authority figure that I have to rebel against and be like, no, fuck you. I ain't going to do this because you told me to do it.
Do you think you would have felt the same when you were like 20?
Oh, yeah. I've been feeling this way my entire life.
Yeah, because I feel like my feeling was like, man, I wish this had been around when I was 20 because I would have shaved my head and been a space monkey immediately. But,
really?
But like now I'm like, I kind of already got my personality kind of locked. Oh. So I don't know if like
nowadays I might even try it just to try a new thing as long as I knew the barrier to escape was the barrier to exit was really low. But part of the point of one of these exercises is to make the barrier to exit a little higher than most things. So
Yeah.
I
Well, that
still
makes-
probably wouldn't have signed up.
That's
but
like signing up for boot camp in the military. That like
Right.
you can leave, but the idea is that it's there's some shame involved and there's probably some paperwork or whatever, and lots of incentives not to. You lose your pay and benefits that if you actually finish the program, but that part of that is to keep you in it, right? And it's like I mentioned Stick before, I think on the last episode. With 2Ks. I'm not sure if they're still around, but the idea that you could put up your own money to say, if I don't commit to going to the gym 3 times a week, then I lose the money.
They're still around, yeah.
And then that way it's, good. I'm glad they're still there.
I think the reason I had such a negative reaction to it is because I was raised in a cult, and not a mild cult, not a hardcore one, but right away I was like, nope, someone who thinks that they're in charge, I am allergic to all this, get me the fuck out.
But this wasn't actually a cult, and you can see that it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious. Since you weren't actually impassioned to go to the keyboard and say this is a bad idea, but neither did you come out and defend it. So
I don't remember if I came out and defended it, but I would have said, we need more experiments, go for it. They're adults, they can do what they want.
Yeah.
I just personally had squeamish feelings about it and would have never touched it.
Yeah, I think I don't remember, but I think I probably didn't say anything because I was like, this sounds really interesting, but it really is possible that this guy is like just like psycho who wants to put himself in a position of power, and then I will really regret having said this was a cool idea.
Right.
Which I now feel a bit cowardly about, because what was actually happening is like everyone who knew him personally was posting, and they were like, really, you people have this all wrong, like you're mischaracterizing this, and they would have been the ones to trust about it, I think.
So
part of your whole, it's easy to assassinate people on a character assassinate people online.
Yeah,
thing.
definitely. Yeah, definitely part of that.
So the other way to spin that though is it. So why were other intelligent rationalists speaking out against it so vehemently if they weren't coming from a cult-like background? I guess I can't quite sympathize because
maybe just a general background of people who've been abusive to them and pattern matching this guy's behavior to, this is a controlling individual who just gets off on power and it's going to become abusive. It's going to become a Milgram experiment or Stanford prison experiment. Stanford prison is the one I'm going for, even though that one was apparently complete bullshit.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably the pattern match that's happening.
But aren't we better than that? I mean, are we supposed to be better than that?
We're supposed to be better than that. And as the thing was described, sounded to me like it was thought out pretty well. So
And that's the weird thing. It's like everyone signing up for that is in the rationalist community, and so you would think, okay, these are people who are at least familiar with rationalist skills. They can maybe take care of themselves, and yet everyone still right away jumped on this is a cult, people shouldn't do it, because I guess the urge to protect people from themselves is very strong.
yeah, that's well put. Yeah, it's like an expectation that once they get into this environment, they're going to become brainwashed.
Yeah.
And not be able to leave. And it's like, that's a pretty low expectation of human beings in general. And
When were you born, roughly-ish?
85.
85? Okay. I remember in the late 80s, up through the, I think, mid-90s, there was the whole satanic panic and the cult thing in the U.S. Maybe the, younger generations coming after us won't have quite this same mentality, because, dude, I absolutely remember if you play Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to end up murdering your friends in a basement because you're going to get brainwashed into thinking that you're these people on these adventures, and when your character dies, you got to kill the player too. Keep it realistic,
But that's the average idiot.
That's
not the average rationalist.
Well,
So as long as we're talking about how we're not a cult, we can say that there are aspects of the rationality culture that are better in some respects than culture at large.
Yeah, but
That
I
sounds
think
like a
it's
very
still
nice
hard
way
to
to put it.
internalize that. That just the impulse to paternalism comes so naturally to everyone. I think.
And admitting that makes us sound culty because every subgroup will say that, right?
Yeah.
So
And I don't know those guys, so they could be. I mean, like I feel like even if you're like a Mormon, which is a fairly close knit thing, like I've like my Facebook wall right now is alive with people who are like Mormons arguing with Mormons about this scandal that's happening. The details aren't really that important, but I could go into it. But basically,
I am slightly interested. There's a Mormon scandal right now?
yeah, it's this idea that there's some interview that's part of their process of going through the process of education, indoctrination, however you want to phrase it. And the interview is always like one of the church elders alone in the room with the kid, a teenage kid who may be a woman or a man. And apparently there's been allegations that this context is being taken advantage of for abuse, which we've seen in other churches.
That
It's
never
not
happens
shocking.
in the church.
Right, yeah. And so a lot of the Mormons are saying, like, maybe there just needs to be 2 people in the room for these things. And like the response of the Mormon church is apparently like the head of that movement is like going to be excommunicated. So it's like that's not a good look.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, this is tangent from what my point was, which was just like I'm not gonna vouch for some other guy who claims to be part of the rationalist community, but I'll vouch for my community and the people I know. And I think that's kind of how religions work: is there's webs of smaller communities of people that are linked by shared ideology across space, and they form a global mesh that way. But it only works if you have the local web.
Yeah, that actually brings something to mind. I'm not aware of anybody who's been excommunicated from the rationality community. Has that ever happened to anyone's knowledge?
Well, you'd have to have an excommunicator.
Well, so I mean, other than being banned by Yudkowsky on Less Wrong or something, or on the Facebook group or something. So to that extent, I do actually know somebody who's been banned from the Facebook group.
Me too. Yeah.
I think we talked about that on the show. It was a complete misunderstanding, but it was so plausibly not a misunderstanding that I totally get it.
Yeah.
So, to the extent that we're not, well, we don't have the hierarchy in place to do that. So that seems like a point in favor of us not being culty. But there's also not even like a social banning that I'm aware of, right?
I wouldn't mind if we had a hierarchy. That's kind of where I am. Like, I wouldn't mind if we had a hierarchy, if we had leaders, if we had like a level system, of like you've taken the CFAR classes, and that entitles you to like a certain rank. I mean, I know like this is probably setting off alarm bells, but like for me, it's like, why cut things off the table that could potentially actually cause it to be something that people would want to join, instead of just like, oh, it's just a bunch of people who talk about a topic.
I think my initial, having just considered this for the first time, I only have 1 or 2 quick thoughts, and one of them is that I think one of the appeals of the community is that it's okay to say that, hey, Yudkowsky, I think you're right on these things, but I think you're wrong on this one, and that's not a bannable offense. Right?
Sure. But
So
I'm pretty sure you could make an organization where that was the case too. Like, I can say the president of the United States is wrong about everything, and that'll get kicked out of the country. So you just have to have a good system of power instituted.
What is the point of those ranks, though?
I mean, so in response to
So
this
you've
whole...
been to a CFAR class. I mean, that gives you some status among your peers, but you don't... There's no churches or anything.
Well, I think it means a surprising amount to have that feeling of belonging. So like, I was in response to this whole, like, I had a bad online argument a few days ago, and I was like, I want to learn how to be more persuasive. So I was reading like a book on persuasion, and part of it is like how much humans enjoy and are susceptible to the feeling of belonging and group norms. I mean, we all know this already. Like, this is part of our community kind of literature anyway, is how powerful that can be. So it's like, if your goal, and maybe this is not, maybe you guys don't have this goal, but like, if your goal is to spread the ideas of clear thinking, arriving at the truth more effectively, and pursuing our goals in an effective way, spread those ideas as goods unto themselves, then you should want to make an organization that can actually do that. In order to have that, it would help to have some kind of actual structure, such that human brains would be like, oh, that's an organization. That's not just a bunch of like-minded people. I totally understand if people are like, no, Matt, I do not want that. I do not want an organization. I want a loose band of like-minded people, because that's my thing. And I'm like, well, I actually empathize with that very much. And everything I'm saying is take very lightly. Take what I'm saying very lightly, and as just like blue sky thinking about potential, not like I want everything to be the way I want it, because that's the opposite of what I'm trying to say here.
No, I think I get it perfectly. I don't know what about all these microphones and recording equipment would make you think that we want to spread these ideas. I think I heard you perfectly, and I think everyone's gonna maybe I'm biased, but I think I interpreted that generously enough to not think that you're arguing for this so that you can accentuate yourself as the one true dictator. And
Right.
Although if it worked out that way, well, if you say so.
There could be worse dictators out there.
Right. But I think I remember back when I'd go to skeptics, like I was more involved in the skeptic community and went to a few conferences. I can't remember if this is one of the talks that I went to or if it was one online, but Richard Dawkins talked about how he was at a skeptics conference because he had said something about how getting skeptics, maybe it was atheists, doesn't matter, getting, woke folk back in the day, that meant something different, rights,
Right.
to all cohere and work together in a focused way was like herding cats. And he had said, and I think that's a compliment. And in a way, I totally see where he's coming from, and I think you can too. But in a way, like, sure, it's a compliment in that we're hard to corral, but in a totally also legitimate way, that's a way that we since we can't corral and coordinate, that's why we don't get anything done.
Yeah,
That's why, like,
never go to the moon if you're all bunch of cats everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but
You
I mean,
need focused effort to get to the moon.
he used the example of, like, politicians clamor to get the Jewish vote, even though they're like 2% of the United States population or something. And there's no one trying to get the atheist vote of 15%,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because we're hard to coordinate. But if and part of that's
But it would go against the
whole
I
point.
feel like
that,
it would go against the mindset of the atheist in general, because at least back in the way most people got to atheism was by not going along with society and by breaking out of those organizations and being like, fuck your social systems, fuck your sense of belonging. I care more about being right about this thing.
Yeah, but that, I think it's an overgeneralization of that instinct to not be a joiner, because it's like if I was talking about Dune earlier. Sorry to anyone who hasn't read Dune, but like if there were such a thing as the Bene Gesserit or the Mentat, I would join that, even though it's cult-like, because it's like, the
the
thing
Bene
they turn you into is an amazing godlike thing. So like if there were a rationality community that actually made you like Jeffrey Sy from Eliezer's stories, I would join that in a heartbeat, even as a like person who wants to be free thinking, because it's like, well, you've got the proof, you've demonstrated that what you do is actually valuable. Right now we don't really have that. So, and I don't know, and it's actually pure conjecture that we could even have that. Like it's science fiction of me to think that, if we had a rationality organization, then we could train people to perform better and et cetera and be mentats. It's like, well, maybe not. Maybe you teach people rationality and you improve their performance 4% on specific things and not otherwise. I don't know. What do you think about mentats, Stephen?
Well,
Stephen
actually,
hasn't read the books.
I haven't read the books, but
I know.
Mentats is what they call the smart drug in Fallout games. So
Makes
if it's
sense.
anything like that, then I'm a big fan. I'm assuming that's on purpose.
Probably a reference, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a mentat is just someone who's been trained to serve, like to be so good at thinking that they can serve the function of a computer at need. So,
That sounds dope.
yeah.
Now, I'm sure there's great drawbacks because it's a book, but
Well, Dune is just about, like, it's about human potential. Like, that's the whole theme of the book. So it's like, if we're riffing on the idea of like what you could be if you were more rational, that's kind of where my mind goes.
that all sounds appealing.
I think people don't necessarily, like, unless you're familiar with like the sequences, I think people don't necessarily understand what it would mean to be more rational. Like, they don't understand how not rational they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or what the perks are.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting by, I pay my bills, I've got a job and stuff, people might say. But, I mean, the hard part for me is, like, I didn't get to live the counterfactual where I didn't get involved in any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But my life's a lot better than it was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because I have more tools to make better decisions and come to realizations that I wouldn't have come to otherwise.
Yeah.
So I've got a selling point for myself. I could probably convince myself of 10 years ago that I should get started on this earlier, but I don't know. This is obviously a harder problem than I've given enough thought to, but I don't know how you go to somebody who just isn't really interested and say, look, here's why this is worth, reading 3 million words
Right.
and studying some stuff.
Yeah, well, and I haven't succeeded. Like, the friends that I have who've read the sequences are the people who are going to read them anyway, and the people who I've tried to convince who aren't in that class, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons probably, they're just, no thanks. It's like if you had a book on the shelf of Barnes & Noble that was like, this book will make you smarter,
Well, I would first of all just doubt the premise of the book. I'd be like, this book sounds like a lie. I'm not giving you my $10.
And I think that's a great point. Like there's a certain incredulity to the whole thing where it's like, you say that it made you more rational or whatever. You say you get a lot out of it, but a lot of people say things.
Maybe that's why people think of us as a cult, because they're like, this doesn't really help your life at all, but the fact that you keep saying it does makes you sound like you have been, you've drunken the Kool-Aid. You've bought into this system where now you have to tell everyone how much better it makes their lives. Though I don't believe it does.
Unless you look at the content of it, it's just like The Secret or something,
right?
Where it's like, no, really, trust me. It's like, well, no, I don't trust you.
On the plus side, I'm not saying trust me, read these and give me $10,000, right? So we have that going for us. But I think that's part of what CFAR was trying to do, and maybe still is. But I don't know if they've published anything. Certainly nothing that's trickled down to us yet that has shown. The other downside too is that because of how small they are and how necessarily small their sample sizes are, and how hard it would be to do any sort of controls. I know they've done some. They'll call some. They'll do follow-ups and stuff. But for the most part, it's self-selected people who want to do this. I think if I'm remembering correctly, this is either something they did or thought about doing, or making this all up. But they thought about paying for some people to come. So you guys pay. You guys are the ones who really want to come and get this. So we'll see how you guys do, and we'll pay for you to come, and you guys will come do that. You guys will do the same thing, and we'll see how you do as well. But that's not even really true blindness, because those. I mean, if the whatever Church of Mormon wanted me to come join them for a 3-week course, unless they're gonna set me up pretty nice for 3 weeks, I'd probably just say no thanks, right?
I think
so. That's already a pretty small self-selected group.
It's pretty interesting that, as far as I know, the single most effective way to get people into rationality has been Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
I'm glad that came up.
Yeah, it's like I believe last time SSC had a survey, like 30% of the people who first found out about rationality found out about it specifically from reading that and then being like, "Oh, this sounds interesting."
Yeah.
And that was essentially me.
It feels like it's a great filter for finding the kind of people that do like this kind of thing.
Yeah, I would have been rationality adjacent back then because I was listening to Rationally Speaking, and it doesn't get much more adjacent than that. But yeah, I was in that group of people that would have, like you said, would have read it anyway. I just needed to know it existed.
It's showing people what life is like through demonstration, which is one of the things fiction does best. But going back to my old cult ways. One of the things we often heard in church was like, just live a good, happy, successful life. And other people will be like, what's that person doing that's so successful? Oh, he's Jehovah's Witness. Maybe I should look into that. And so, I mean, you were always on display. It's one of the reasons that I don't have any bumper stickers on my car identifying myself as an atheist, because I kind of drive like an ass, and I don't want people to think, atheists drive like asses. Yeah. But yeah, my entire life, everywhere I go, I'm always under the feeling I'm a representation of the group most people most strongly identify me with, which has been a large part of the reason why I try not to advertise the groups I identify with.
Yeah, that's understandable.
But,
I tend not to advertise myself at all. Like, I tend to wear darker colors or like nothing with a brand name on it. I don't have any bumper stickers, not because I don't want to be identified as something, but mainly because like if I got pulled over and I have a Hillary bumper sticker and the cop is a Trump voter, I don't want to get a ticket for that reason. So I'm going to be completely neutral to everybody all the time.
Right.
And I can blend in quietly and no one will talk to me or bother me.
But I mean, the cool thing is, especially back in the days, like when Christianity was being persecuted in the Roman Empire and stuff, if you had some secret way to identify other Christians, all of a sudden you guys got this really tight bond, You're like, oh shit, you're a Christian. Yeah, no, go off without a ticket. And do you need any help with this? How are your kids doing? If you can find the other people that you identify strongly with, there's much more coordination, even just like out in the world,
Yeah, maybe like a vague bumper sticker than on my car of like something only another rationalist would get.
A big yud.
Yeah, sure. Or just Harry snapping his fingers like that little logo or something.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then, the one cop who pulls me over is like, oh my God, you read Methods of Rationality?
Yeah,
oh, man, you're not going to get a speeding ticket. Here's $50. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. I like that you brought up the Methods of Rationality, because like that at the meetup, actually, one thing we were talking about was this idea that, number one, I feel like there should be a more concise resource than the sequences. There is actually benefit to having to get through millions of words because it sinks in deeper, I think. But also I feel like there should be like a 100-page rationality handbook, which I wrote 2 pages of since that meeting. But anyway, I feel like there should be more on-ramps because like methods of rationality is a great on-ramp. But there could be many different kinds of on-ramps, and HPMOR, like, it's controversial is one thing about it. Like it sucks in a lot of people, but it filters out a different subset of people. And I'm like, well, what if you had this other thing over here that was rationalist propaganda, frankly? I mean, I can say that. That's what we're talking about, except in a different voice without Yudkowsky's idiosyncrasies, which I personally love, but a lot of people don't. And I'm not just saying that idly. Like I seriously think about, like, I've thought many times actually over
that's what Slate Star Codex is, right?
It certainly, yeah. That's another one. That's a very different animal, but it is, yeah. And I've thought about, like, well, what would I make? And it's like, well, I never quite get there actually, but it's fun to think about anyway.
I've thought of like pamphlets for the same reason, and there's a PDF on the Facebook page for the group that isn't so much of like a here's a list, but more of like a, if this is your first meeting, you can read this. I don't know how many words are in a pamphlet, but like, somewhere in like the low hundreds. You can read this in 10 minutes, and you'll be able to follow some of the lingo or something.
We have something like that on our Facebook page, don't we?
That's what I was saying. Yeah,
like a 2-page thing.
Yeah. So we have that, but it's not a here's why you should be rationalist. It's a here's a way to keep up with the conversation at the meetups. Right. I don't know how you could make something that short that would inspire people, that wouldn't just be any generic here's our cult. No, I mean that, like, not a pejorative way. Because when you're saying 100-page thing, I'm thinking that's way too long. I'm not gonna be able to convince somebody who has no real interest to read a 100-page thing. And I think it's great. And if you have any interest in making a collaborative effort, I feel like that's something our group could do.
Yeah, that occurred to me, because basically to make it as like a collaborative Google Doc, but like you said, there's so many kind of design questions, if you will, that go into it. Like, okay, what is this? Is this an instructional? Does this contain rationality techniques? Does it contain theory? Does it contain both? Is it more of a persuasive piece? Is it more of a this is why you should bother with this?
Like Influence, Science, and Practice. Have you read that?
That's literally what I started reading this week. So
perfect. Yeah. I was going to say, if you haven't, there's that, and then he co-authored another book called Yes! 50 ways to get people to agree with you or something. And it's just 50 little anecdotes. But yeah, that's a great book. I strongly recommend it.
Because I think we're all on the same page in that it's like, we don't want to persuade people. We don't want to trick them. We don't want to trick people. We want to portray what we actually genuinely view as the worthwhile things about it. Because I don't think that document exists. I don't think here is the essay on why you should actually check this stuff out. I don't think that does exist.
And to be clear, I was shilling for Influence, not for Yes, the book. Okay. Influence is written by Robert Cialdini, and the 4th edition is available on Amazon for $0.01. So you just pay shipping. I'm not sure if you can get it with Prime or not, but it's cheap as dirt. Cheaper than dirt, probably. I don't know. I've never bought dirt.
Depending on the quality of the dirt, it can be expensive.
Right. So the one thing that you can do, like, this brings to mind when you said, how is it? There's I forget the name of the technique when you're designing an app, or like designing how to because I'm building, like I said, a mobile app with some friends at work. You put on like user personas, and you think, okay, this is, as this kind of user, here's what I want to be able to do, and as this kind, I want to be able to do this. And you can think of a couple, 3, 4 types of people who might be using this kind of thing, and you can tailor it to all of them. But you're doing it by thinking first, kind of your target audience. Who's this for, and what are they going to use this for? So then that helps you write to that end.
Yeah. I'm worried about being too bland. One of the things that he did bring up in the Moscow Community Hub article was that there are a lot of anti-cafes in Moscow, and they generally charge about 5 times more per minute than he does. And those cafes they have a lot more people in them, and they have a lot of like PlayStations and soccer and stuff like that. And he says, I realized that I could make a lot more money on this by doing the same thing, by appealing to a much wider audience, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep this place filtered for the people who are, more like the rationalist people who spend a lot of time on introspection and thinking about thinking and stuff like that. And yeah, it's not the financially best idea, but it also keeps the space the way I want it to be. And I don't know, are we trying to appeal to literally everyone? Because I know there's got to be some cutoff as to the market that we actually can feasibly sell to. I don't like to use sell, but still remain who we are and have our mission be what it is.
I think those are two separate points, though. Who will buy our thing and who are we trying to sell it to? And those should be kind of the same question, but they're not, right? So I think at the end goal, we don't want to have this elite, well, maybe we do, this elite class of rationalists who we become an exclusive club with a high barrier to entry. We're not going to raise the sanity waterline by staying at being 0.08% of the population or something, right?
Right.
Or whatever we're at.
I just think that this growth may need to be a little bit slower than right away open the doors to everyone, because
right now the doors are open to everyone.
Yeah, they are open to everyone, but there's a lot of filters in that prevent most people from coming.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that, like, I haven't thought about it for 5 minutes, but I would say that our target would be anyone who would have a good time hanging out with the type of person who enjoys rational stuff, but who otherwise wouldn't join the rationalist community because of any number of reasons. Like, I run into people all the time online who, I won't name any names, but like some people who I'm just like, man, you would fit in, like this, you would like this. But especially if they're an internet person, they already have some prior impression of the rationality community, which is negative, or usually negative, honestly. And I'm like, even for very, very superficial reasons, like, oh, it's a bit arrogant to call yourself a rationalist, isn't it? Right. I'm like, come on. But like, that's the level on which I'm like, even you saying that makes me think that you're the kind of person who thinks in terms that I could appeal to if I could get past that wall.
Yeah. It's really disheartening. I think it was it Greg Egan? I think it was Greg Egan who's written some amazing books which are just considered like, near the top of rational fiction canon, right? Mm-hmm. And he is so anti the movement that he wrote in a less wrong analog in one of his books as villains. And I'm like, dude, you're right there with us. Yeah, oh my God. Right. How did we miss the boat on that one?
Yeah. Also, I'm just guessing, having not read any of his books or read this one in particular, but I bet rationalists loved that. Yeah. I mean, we had a rationalist analog as the best villain ever in Methods of Rationality.
Well, but
sort
they were
of.
not
True.
good villains. They were like the nerd trio from Buffy season 6. I think it was season 6.
I've only seen most of season 1 of Buffy, but maybe we'll say like Spock.
No, not at all like Spock.
Okay.
They were inept, socially incompetent.
Sheldons.
Yes.
Then. Okay.
Yes,
well,
yes.
That sucks.
Yeah.
So he couldn't even do the justice of not strawmanning us.
Right.
Weak.
But I mean, for some reason he's come to that impression, right?
It just drives me crazy because, like, relative to the actual Overton window of like what is talked about as mattering, us and Greg Egan are on the same page.
Oh yeah.
Like, so it's so destructive and pointlessly wasteful for like, it reminds me of all the like David Chalmers attacks on rationality. I'm like, dude, you're one of us. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh wait, we did we haven't done this episode yet. Can we do a vocab drop? What was an Overton window for anyone who's not familiar?
Overton window is the domain of political or even perhaps even non-political topics that it's acceptable to talk about in society at a given point in time. And so the point is that the boundaries of the Overton window shift over time to exclude certain things.
At one point, it was not at all okay about talking about gay people. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you basically couldn't even mention it back in the day, and then it shifted a little, and you could talk about it, but only in terms of like those are bad people, and it's gone more and more to the point where now people are like, yeah, those trans people are awesome, mm-hmm. which is not the same thing as gay, but
it's past that.
Yes,
term,
exactly.
In terms of
for the general public, that's one step even past
right,
that.
historically anyway, for sure. So
and similarly, no longer acceptable to talk about certain racial things that were acceptable in the past. So it's but I mean, like the actual Overton window of discourse doesn't even like like what we want is like orthogonal to that, as far as I can tell. Like if I have, like I honestly think the closest thing I have to like political convictions is that humans should like think more clearly, figure out the truth about things, and then pursue the right answers. It's like, well, Matt, that's not a political philosophy. It's like, well, yeah, no, I mean, apparently either side of the spectrum is equally inimical to actually just finding out what the truth is. So I guess I'm in neither of those camps.
That's me in half my moods, and then the last 2 years, I've developed the second mood.
I want to make a quick interjection for the record. We had technical issues and had to stop recording for a little bit. We have now come back and are recording again. That is why there is sort of a disjoint in the conversation here.
Yeah, we went downstairs and politics came up, so that's where we came back up to. But I wanted to finish up the episode. We've been on it for almost a couple hours, so it's about time to wrap it up. But we had, in that notes section I mentioned at the top of the episode, a subheading called Side Topics to indulge Steven / stir the pot. And there's at least a couple of these I wanted to get around to if we have time.
Do at least one.
All right, well, the one we get, this one is...
Do the one you most want to do, because we may not have time for a couple.
All right, well, one's 30 seconds.
Okay.
One, I saw Deadpool 2 for the second time because someone had it on their server and I was able to watch it at home. And I tried to watch it this time. I had somebody critique the first one when I showed them because they didn't watch a lot of like movies and stuff. They're like, yeah, I don't know, it was okay, but it didn't even pass the Bechdel test or anything. And I'm like, okay, so I wanted to watch Deadpool 2 to see if it did. And I don't think it did either. But so then I mainly was just thinking like the Bechdel test, Terminator 2 and Aliens didn't pass it, and like
no, Alien specifically did pass it. That's the strip that invented the term Bechdel test was referencing Alien.
Aliens, wasn't she the only woman in that movie?
No, there was Vasquez.
Yeah. No, Aliens had Vasquez, but the original Alien also had a second female.
Yeah,
okay,
they both had two. Yeah.
Fair enough. So Terminator 2 then. All right, but whatever. I was going to say that like Sir Mix-a-Lot's I Like Big Butts passes the Bechdel test.
Yes.
And I guess I brought that up because I think that's a bad test.
Yeah, well, the Bechdel test was never intended to be a one-off test on a single movie to determine whether it's a good movie or a bad movie. It's more of a barometer of the entire movie scene as a whole. And so taken in broad strokes across the entire industry, it is indicative of something. In any one given movie, it's like taking the temperature any one given day. You can't say, oh, global warming is real or global warming is fake because the temperature is higher or lower than it was yesterday. You look over a large span of time.
Also, I'm pretty sure Sarah Connor has a conversation with one of the psychiatric ward women about opening the door while she's holding the man hostage.
Boom. There we go.
Was that a woman?
Mm-hmm.
All I remember was that pasty doctor.
No, you're right. It was, the woman she had the Drano in his neck.
Yeah, she had the Drano in his neck, and she's saying, open the door.
Or I'll kill him. They're talking about a man, right? So that doesn't pass the test.
Oh, my God.
Do I win on pedantic points there?
I'm sure we can find another woman somewhere in that movie.
I don't know. But
Miles Dyson's wife.
We can't find a bigger badass than Sarah Connor in that movie.
It's true.
Which is kind of the point of what you're saying, that it's not a fantastic test for judging a movie's merit, because it's like she's the protagonist.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, that was my just random thought I had. Anyway, everyone should watch Deadpool 2. And I had one minor quibble. You guys saw it?
No.
Oh, it was Deadpool 2?
Not
Yeah,
yet.
I loved it.
I haven't yet.
You haven't seen it? Oh, then I'll save it. No, that's fine.
Okay.
You're good. You should see it.
Is it like a big spoiler?
Are you familiar with the premise?
Just it doesn't matter. I don't care about spoilers.
Are you quite sure?
Yeah. Really.
Okay, fine. Because it ruins one of the funny things. But Cable's watch lets him teleport through time.
Mm-hmm.
He uses it initially to teleport back in time, and then he uses it later to revert to a younger version of himself.
Does he?
He uses it in the final fight scene.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. There's not two Cables in the final fight scene the second time. There's just the one.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then half the time that Deadpool uses it, he does both.
Yep, they were inconsistent.
Yeah,
about
that was it.
Yeah, this is a movie that breaks the fourth wall, though, so
it does.
Hard to feel too bad about it, right?
But if Deadpool had turned to the camera and said, "I know this isn't consistent," I'd have been fine with it. Maybe he does. Maybe it's one of the fast lines he gets away with, or something. Maybe he does say "Why weren't there two of you?" I don't know. My other thing that I put on the list was very, very, very fast because I wanted to get into it, but I'll be quick. The James Gunn / Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was put on permanent or on indefinite hiatus because James Gunn put out some bad tweets 8 years ago. And
while he was working for Troma, no less.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Troma?
No.
Oh my God. Okay, so Troma is totally the sort of production company that would want you to put out those tweets. They made like The Toxic Avenger and Sergeant Kabuki Man and Tromeo and Juliet, and it's basically extremely bad taste, campy horror that was popular in the 80s. Popular in quotes. I mean, it had weird cult followings, but yeah, it was all about like gore and boobs and just everything you think about like 80s cheap B-movie horror. That was their thing, and they leaned right into it. They were like, we love this. This is us. We're going to have exploding tits on the screen. And like in one movie, like they found a script about a movie, and there was like tits explode on page 97. They're like, this is a terrible movie. What the fuck? And then 30 minutes later in the movie, somebody's tits explode when she's shot in the back from a shotgun. It's ridiculous bullshit. But they're totally the kind of production company that would want him pushing those sorts of tweets.
So that makes me more in his camp. So the Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm referring to the actors now, but it's no surprise that I'll side with the Guardians of the Galaxy. In both the jokey sense and the real sense. They all signed a letter saying, look, who he was 8 years ago isn't who he is now. He's totally awesome, and we all agree. You guys should. This is, a joke. Add into that the fact that this was a deliberate character assassination by an alt-right nut job because Gunn was insulting President Trump. Kind of makes this a whole dangerous precedent, scary thing. So
it's been a dangerous precedent, scary thing for a while now. People
yeah,
have
but
been
now it's
getting
impacting
Twitter.
the MCU. so now
the stakes are raised.
Now Steven's getting up and he's ready to join the fight.
Okay.
So, it's funny. I'm joking. It's late now. I'm tired. But anyway, I thought there was more interesting stuff to explore there. But the point is like I think that I was going to say he was an asshole making bad jokes 8 years ago. If now I know that he's working for a place that like, was leaning into this kind of humor. Granted, it's dark humor. No one today should find it funny.
And most people, I'm assuming that sort of production company are already the sort of edgelord asshole type. Those are the kind that like that sort of humor. So yeah, he could have still been sort of an asshole making bad jokes, but
totally
that was part of the thing happening.
Right,
in that
and
company.
Disney knew his history.
Yeah.
So, it's stupid.
The main thing was that like now that this is out there, there's not even gonna be a conversation. We need to placate immediately, right? So
I mean, you were talking about using dark arts, and I'm like, with the current climate, we should just continue to whine about this forever because it'll probably work. Because like companies are actually, complying with Twitter mobs. This is happening now.
Which is ridiculous.
Which is ridiculous, and I'm not happy about it. But if it's happening anyway, maybe we can get James Gunn back on Guardians 3.
I think that'd be great. For not just for having a good Guardians 3, but also for the other societal benefits.
I personally am very happy that Guardians 3 got put on permanent hiatus because I think stealing it from him was really wrong, and it would not be the right movie without him.
Totally, yeah. In that sense, I'm glad it was put on hiatus. I gave you a very angry look when you said you were glad it was taken off.
No.
I thought you were
I would
say,
be happy if it came back with him.
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they didn't continue on, like taking it from him.
Yeah,
right on. I would definitely want to hear about your recovery from your migraine issues.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to frame this, but like I basically had chronic migraines for like between 6 and 15 years, depending on how you count.
Time?
I mean, depending on whether you count from when I was diagnosed or from when I probably started actually having it but didn't know.
And for people who've been listening for a while, Matt was actually on our episode about rationally raising kids or rational parenting, and had to leave maybe 20-25 minutes in because the migraine got so bad he couldn't stand up without vomiting anymore.
Yeah. And that's kind of what my life has been like for many, many years. And the reason I'm bringing this up is like, first of all, I never do talk about this normally because it's like, I don't know, you don't want to seem weak and pathetic and like stigmatized, but like I've finally found this drug that's actually like cured it. And I haven't had any headaches in a month, which is like the first time that's happened in 6 years at least.
Awesome.
So it's kind of amazing. And I don't know if I had any like a point other than just like, it's really quite a thing.
We're happy for you. You have a great quality of life improvement.
Yeah. And I get not wanting to be, talking about that sort of thing.
What is the drug? Is it like some kind of experimental new thing?
It's newly approved by the FDA, and what it does is basically it's like a neurotransmitter blocker for a particular neurotransmitter channel that just like stays in your body for a long period of time, and it just like it doesn't work perfectly for everyone. In fact, most people it helps a little bit, but I just happen to be someone who it basically cured, and it's a really weird time. It's in a really weird month. I like one thing I was saying to people is like I kind of feel like I just got out of prison because there's like you would naively think when someone gets out of prison that they would be overjoyed, but actually there's like a mixture of bitterness about the time that they lost, and then like paralysis at like the possibilities before them. That's kind of my actual state. I'm not trying to be negative about it because I'm actually thrilled, but it's a subjectively interesting experience to be cured of something that you've had your whole life.
I can only imagine, and yeah, I'm overjoyed. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Is this? I guess if he said it doesn't have a very high success rate for the average person, maybe it's not worth plugging the drug. But
it's called Aimovig.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry about cutting you off. I literally thought the question was just going to be a quick, what's it called? Aimovig. Okay, and back to you. So I didn't mean to steer that away from you.
When
you were saying, I kind of understand about the whole not wanting to look vulnerable.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, I was going to raise a related thing, but yeah, it's...
I think that's a big thing that used to be a really big thing in our society. I mean, I think up until the modern era, by modern era, I mean the past 20 years, it was a really big thing to hide any weakness you had and always try to look as strong and fit as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that might have been somewhat toxic because it's important for everyone to know that we're all struggling with shit, and it's good to be able to commiserate with other people and comfort them and say, yeah, I got bad things too. And you know, otherwise everyone feels like they're the secret loser and everyone else is awesome, you know?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think we're also in a weird place in society now where in some cases people are like fighting to look as disadvantaged as possible.
Right.
Which is just a thing that has been blowing my mind.
Yeah. Just like from my point of view, like you don't really want to tell your employer how impaired you are. Right. You don't want to be the one in every social situation who needs to basically be taken care of, or no, I can't go eat there for this reason. No, I can't do that activity because it would wear me out too quickly. So you just try to soldier through and hide it, which is, frankly, from my point of view, it's better to soldier through and then collapse than it is to just never try. But I'm glad I don't have to struggle with that anymore. But I don't know. I guess the reason to bring it up is like you said, I think it's good to be aware of how much like every person is fighting their own battle and suffering a lot that you don't see. And I almost feel ashamed that I'm only able to talk about it now that I'm like out of it. But I think it's worth saying anyway.
And I'm glad you did. And I guess there's another lesson to draw from that how many other things have you tried over the last 6 to 15 years?
I mean, I couldn't even enumerate them.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to guess. And so I guess this is something that if you're dealing with something, if someone else out there is dealing with something that I've tried 10 things, it's, maybe number 11, maybe number 12.
Yeah.
So keep looking, keep trying, and you might find the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have the bittersweet experience of having found the thing, and you wish that number 50 had been number 1. But, I guess it's a light message for hope, kind of contrasting to where I was at 10 minutes ago talking about politics.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I've definitely, I've literally had that like thought of in the past been like, this is really rough, but like, I am just going to continue to hope that someday they will figure this out. And I don't know when, but someday. And I almost didn't believe it, but just the idea that it might be possible kind of, I don't know, it seems dramatic to say it kept me going, but it kind of did. So
it kept you motivated at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's...
And guys, fucking someday the entire human race will be like this for everything.
Yeah. And that's a worthy connection to make, because it's like, this is a bit of a transhumanism thing. It's like, I was broken and now I'm fixed.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, I got LASIK, which is that's my weak argument for transhumanism. And I've mentioned the glasses thing before, but now I don't get to make that point. Now I get to say I wasn't content with the eyes nature gave me, so I got laser eyes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, it's not that interesting. And right now I'm seeing slightly worse than I did with glasses, which is driving me insane. But I've got a few more weeks before I need to go complain to my doctor about it. So, but it's just the transhumanism point that, and this is transhumanism and literally everything else. Don't settle. If you're not happy with where things are, get out there and crush it, right? So
life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Get mad.
Burn.
Make life take the lemons back.
Yeah.
Get your engineers to build lemons that are combustible so you can burn life's house down.
Demand to see life's manager.
Yes.
Or make one of those.
I really got to memorize that whole thing.
I had it all memorized. I have it all actually on my phone because I'm a complete nerd. I have all 11 minutes of Cave Johnson's dialogue from Portal 2 on my phone.
I'm not familiar with this.
Oh, Portal 2.
I never actually played Portal 2.
I had the entire speech framed on my wall up until.
I remember the thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think Portal 1 was the better game, but Portal 2 had more memorable moments like that, like Cave Johnson.
Portal 1 was fun for like the ingenuity. Portal 2 was fun because it was engaging for all the other reasons. The dialogue was insanely awesome. They had Stephen Merchant do the voice of like the little robot that's guiding you around. And one of the best things to do in that game was just like to just stand there if he said to do something and just see what he said. Yeah. They recorded so much dialogue for him to sit there like, well, I guess if you're ready to get around to it, we can go do this. Are you there? Okay. Like there's just so many random funny things like that. And then like random, no, not random, just creative ways to drive home hilarious jokes. Like, there's different chapters of the game and it'll show at the bottom, like chapter this or whatever. And it's like, you're going along and then, oh no, I think this is the part where he kills us. And then chapter 8, the part where he kills you. And then he's big there on the screen. Hello, this is the part where I kill you. And then you get a 50-point achievement, the part where he kills you. Just little funny meta jokes like that were hilarious.
Did you play the first Portal?
I played the first Portal, but not the second one. Yeah. No, I love. I mean, I should. I finally got a computer that can play games, so maybe I'll go get that.
I'm sure it's super cheap. I'll check it out.
Yeah, many years late. It's probably $1. Yeah.
The game experience is the same, so go nuts.
Cool. I will.
All right, Inash, we took a couple. It's your turn to something.
Yes, so my thing. Okay, so I know that a decent fraction of our audience anyway is interested in Stoicism and Stoic philosophy. And we have a friend who was on the podcast before, Thomas Elliott. He was on the podcast about Burning Man, and he talked about, like, why would you go to Burning Man when you can just go, like, to all the ancient ruins directly and see these great cultural things and talk with the actual masters of the stuff? And I was like, well, some of us aren't as adventurous and awesome as you are. But
and that would take more than a week a year, maybe.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, that was an entire lifestyle for him for a number of years. But right now, he has made it his next his next project to translate the Enchiridion, yes. Enchiridion? Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Enchiridion, yeah.
Okay.
I think.
And I mean, it has been translated before. Oh, quickly. The Enchiridion is a Stoic philosophy manual circa 125 AD by Epictetus? Epictetus. Thank you. You're on top of this shit.
I had a Stoic phase.
Nice. Okay. And yeah, there have been translations in the past, but he was not content with them. And so he is starting a Kickstarter right now to fund this translation thing that he's doing. And it hasn't launched yet, but the Kickstarter will launch by the time this episode airs, I believe. So we'll have a link to it. As an example, he said he gave this. My translation of Lesson 40 of the Enchiridion?
Yeah, I think so.
Of the Enchiridion is really different from the prior ones, and I think it is a good representation of why a new translation can be important. I think my translation is not only more suited to being understood by modern ears, but is also actually significantly more faithful to the original word choice. I recognize that, of course, my translation is going to be colored by my current historical biases, but I honestly believe they're less than the previous ones, at least in this instance. So, previously, Lesson 40. Women from 14 years old are flattered by men with the title of mistress. Therefore, perceiving that they are regarded only as qualified to give men pleasure, they begin to adorn themselves, and in that place all their hopes. It is worthwhile, therefore, to try that they may perceive themselves honored only so far as they appear beautiful in their demeanor and modestly virtuous. My translation. Women as young as 14 are catcalled by men. This can give them the impression that the only thing they're good for is sex, and so they put all their hopes in making themselves look good. Instead, you should compliment women on their behavior and virtue.
Yeah.
One of those is a lot more understandable.
Yeah. I mean, the first one just strikes me as a really lazy translation because it's like it seems almost verbatim. It has the weird, horrible structure of Latin, whereas his translation is like sounds like English. So yeah, that's awesome.
And I can only imagine that at the time the original translation was made, it was the fashion to do it, as close as possible.
Yeah.
Which there's a virtue to that probably. But yeah, definitely if you want someone to actually read and like it, it's better to have it more palatable. So
yeah, he's starting the Kickstarter for that. Thought it'd be interesting to a lot of people. Also, a slight self-interest in this. If the Kickstarter reaches a certain stretch goal, he is going to pay me to do the audiobook version. It's only 8,000 words, so it's not very long. But, you might be able to get to hear my wonderful voice reading things.
Well, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely contribute to that. That sounds fun.
Cool.
yeah, sounds good. Be sure to put that on the episode.
Yeah. I didn't know you had a stoic face.
Yeah.
Was this like in high school?
A lot of phases. No, it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I think it overlaps with rationality quite a bit too, in
Mhm.
terms of the outlook mainly.
I think that's why there is the overlap that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I had one last thing from our AMA thread that I put up at the end of the last episode, which we recorded almost a month ago exactly. It's been a long time since we sat down to do this, so it's good to be back.
Yeah.
So we have exactly one post on there so far, and somebody with an incomprehensible Reddit handle, but they said, hi, Eli, so I'm assuming that's their name, wanted to know if we're doing, well, this is to you, but it's on our subreddit. Are you going to do an unsung audiobook?
No. Mainly because someone is already doing an unsung audiobook.
In defense of doing another one, I checked on that, and it has been stalled for a long time.
Oh,
I
has
didn't
it?
check on it recently, but it was backlogged by a while, and the person said that they were, as far as I could tell, it was uncertain whether or not it was going to finish.
Oh, how far did they get?
I'm not sure. I checked back when I was reading Unsung, so like 2 years ago.
Okay. I did like what they had going.
Okay, let's double check.
Yeah, if it ends up having been abandoned, then yeah, maybe possibly in the future I might do an unsung audiobook, assuming of course it's fine with Scott.
Sounds like a plan.
Oh, I did have also what was the thing? Oh, yeah. Massain points out that the Less Wrong Study Hall is $120 a year. They do have a 2-week trial, and if you aren't happy, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's not completely free.
Cool.
But yeah, since we mentioned that in our last episode, it was probably good to mention that as well, that there is a cost to it. The guy whose name I couldn't figure out how to pronounce, MKAIWW, and I was like, MKU. Apparently, call me Kai. The M and the W's on the end are ignored. So
Nice.
just, putting that out there.
That might have been the same person who wrote in on the last one. I'll have to double check.
Oh yeah, there's also someone, don't recognize who, that has an unpublished draft Less Wrong post titled something like, Why Don't Motivation Techniques Work?
Yeah, who would write such a thing?
I think we should motivate him to write that, because it sounds really interesting. And you say that you've read a bunch of these books and you've never found anything to be really motivating.
Yeah, that's accurate. I don't. I was basically in the post as it stands in draft form is like sketching out this idea that like kind of seems like your mind adapts to every motivation technique that you learn and like finds a way around it. That was kind of the point that I was making, and I was like, first of all, why is this? And then how could we address this? I've honestly been having a lot fewer problems with motivation ever since I've stopped being in horrible physical pain all the time. So that's maybe coupled to the fact that motivation techniques don't seem to work for me in the past.
I've noticed that it's much easier for me to do things as well when I'm feeling more physically and emotionally healthy.
Are we on to something here, guys?
Maybe health is awesome.
Yeah.
And finally, Willandu wants to plug Deep Work, a great book by Cal Newport. He does mention a number of things, but the main thing he hits on is that distractions really suck and can destroy the deep, focused work that you need to do a lot of important, productive things. He says that's a problem with many contemporary workplaces. Too many emails, meetings, instant messages, open office plans, random interruptions, just feeling that you're always being watched, and it's just antithetical to productivity. And so he is on my side, says, I strongly agree with even Eneash and Steven that it takes too much time to recover from interruptions and would advise against tools like timers that pull you out of your work every 20 minutes. And yeah, I've also found that I'm really much more productive when I just go hard for a number of hours.
And to be clear with my position on that, I've never tried one of those tools, so it might actually work really well for me.
Yeah.
But my suspicion is that it might not. It might depend. We also and Jess agreed to this too. Like it depends on what we're doing.
Right.
You know, if it's something that requires you to stay in the zone, and like if you've got all this in your head and you're trying to get it down, then being pulled out of it is just going to have to make you rebuild that web again. So
It's interesting. Even when I was doing renovations, which is not mentally taxing, it takes a little bit of mental work, but it's mainly physical skills. I still found it much easier to keep working once I'd started working. If I had to stop for 5 minutes every 20, I don't know, man, would have been awful.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I should not knock it before I've tried it. So at some point I'll give this Pomodoro technique a shot.
nice. Oh, and to be clear, Kai was the same one who wrote in with the unsung question.
Oh, okay.
The comment says hi, comma, Eli, comma. I'm not sure.
Maybe he thinks my name is Eli.
That's a generous misunderstanding of Inyash, but
Eh.
it happens.
I've lived with this name for so long. I've heard everything. Eli is not too far out of the box.
I just feel like it's too short to even sound like. But yeah, it could be. That's all right. Anyway, thanks for the comment, Kai. Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we done?
I think so.
Okay. We just have to thank our patron.
Yes.
We want to do this next time.
Yeah, we've had a couple technical issues that have delayed us, and we're well into 3 hours here, and this is going to be like a 2-hour episode, so I think we'll do 2 patrons next time.
Okay.
Okay.
So instead, thanks to Kyle for putting up with our shit.
Yes.
And making us sound good.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks again for
thank
coming
you
on.
For coming.
And everyone should read Worm and Ward by, and I'm assuming the other stuff Wild Bow's written, but I haven't read Twig or Pact yet, so.
Yeah, Twig's good. I haven't read Pact.
Okay, so, but when you guys do read those, listen to Matt's podcast. We've got Worm and we've got Ward.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, anything else you want to plug while you're here?
No, that sounds good to me.
Sounds good. All right.
Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.